Forget the official statements, let's get right to the real flashpoint of this crisis. So it's not in Caracas, it's shimmering on the waters of Lake Maracaibo. What you're looking at out there is not just some oil platform. It's the Alula, a $1 billion floating production facility, and it's run by a Chinese corporation. It's operated by Chinese engineers and it's guarded by private Chinese security. You need to stop seeing it as just a piece of hardware. You need to see it as a slice of sovereign Chinese economic land floating right in the middle of America's traditional sphere of influence. This is the tangible, immediate reason things are blowing up. While the news cycles are stuck on diplomacy and military posturing for Beijing, this boils down to one massive physical asset. They're condemning this American move as a shocking display of aggression. But what they're really saying with absolute clarity is protect that platform at all costs. That platform is their ticket to the future. It's the engine designed to pump 60,000 barrels of Venezuelan oil directly into China's energy grid every day by 2026. The American maneuver wasn't just a shot at a foreign government. It painted a bullseye on the very foundation of China's strategy for global energy dominance. So if you want to understand what retaliation looks like, you have to begin right here. This platform is the billion-dollar fuse at the heart of this whole powder keg. So how did we end up on this collision course? To really grasp the situation, you have to understand the two vastly different game plans that just crashed into each other. For years, America's playbook for Venezuela was built on one idea: maximum pressure. They used crippling sanctions designed to cut off the government's oil money and trigger a political collapse. This latest military show of force is just the peak of that years-long strategy. But while this was happening, China was running a completely opposite play. Their strategy had nothing to do with pressure. It was all about partnership and deep long-term investment. As US sanctions got tighter, China stepped in and became Venezuela's economic lifeline. They pumped in over $60 billion in loans with a simple arrangement: you'll pay us back in crude oil. That brand new platform on the lake, that's the culmination of the plan turning old debt into a new physical pipeline of energy. What you had was one global power trying to choke off Venezuela's oil supply while another was spending billions to turn the taps wide open. They weren't simply backing opposing teams, they were literally constructing two incompatible realities for the same country. This recent flashpoint isn't just a policy dispute. This is the exact moment when two competing blueprints for power and resources stopped being abstract and violently collided in the real world. And now the entire world is holding its breath to see what emerges from the wreckage. If you really want to comprehend why Beijing's response is so aggressive, you need to follow the money. This new billion-dollar facility isn't some impulsive gamble. It's just the latest chapter in a financial epic that's been more than 10 years in the making. Way before this conflict made headlines, China had quietly become the de facto bank for Venezuela. We're talking about an incredible sum totaling more than $60 billion in loans. This was the ultimate oil-for-cash deal. China fronted the capital that Venezuela was desperate for, funding everything from national infrastructure to everyday imports. In exchange, Caracas gave its word to repay the debt with a steady stream of oil tankers for decades. From Beijing's perspective, this was a brilliant strategic move, locking in a huge long-term energy source completely outside of America's traditional control. The new rig in Lake Maracaibo was the mechanism designed to finally cash in on that promise, converting past-due loans into fresh barrels of oil. So when the United States made its move, it wasn't just jeopardizing one project. It cast a shadow of doubt over the entire $60 billion repayment structure. This fight is about far more than saving a single piece of equipment. It's about defending the core principle of China's economic expansion across the globe. They didn't just place a bet on Venezuelan oil, they bet the house, and now they're forced to protect that wager. So what's the first move when your multi-billion-dollar investment is suddenly in the crosshairs? If you are China, you unleash a coordinated all-out assault, not with warships, but with television cameras and legal teams. The immediate forceful denunciation of the US for a blatant use of force is a carefully planned opening salvo. It's more than just outrage, it's about seizing the narrative. By hammering the phrases violation of international law and violation of sovereignty, China is accomplishing two vital goals simultaneously. First, they're forcing the United States onto the back foot in the global court of public opinion, especially with nations in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America that are deeply suspicious of foreign intervention. Second, and this is the crucial part, they are building the legal and political justification for every action they take next. This narrative paints America as the impulsive aggressor and China as the stable power defending the global status quo. It's the essential opening act before they deploy their more potent non-military weapons. This information war is the new battlefield one where China feels it has a decisive upper hand and they're waging it across every global news channel and diplomatic backroom that they can access. Once the public outcry settles, the real power plays begin quietly behind closed doors. China's primary defense force doesn't carry guns, it's a legion of lawyers. This is where the battle shifts to contracts and finely worded legal clauses. Remember that $60 billion in loans, every single dollar is secured by airtight oil for repayment contracts signed directly with the Venezuelan government. China's approach here is what insiders refer to as lawfare, the strategic use of legal frameworks as a weapon of statecraft. Their first action will be to weaponize these contracts. They will exert immense pressure on any new government in Caracas demanding that every single one of those old agreements is honored. Should that tactic fail, their next step is to drag Venezuela before international arbitration tribunals a move that could lock up the nation's oil revenues in complex legal battles for a decade. This is a masterful, non-violent checkmate. It sends a clear message to any potential new leadership in Venezuela. You might be able to change who your allies are, but you can never escape the financial chains you have with us. With this move, China effectively converts its financial stake into a kind of legal ownership over the country's oil reserves. It's a method for shielding their billion-dollar asset by weaving it into a dense global legal tapestry that even a major military action can't simply tear apart. At the very same time, China is maneuvering diplomatically across the world stage. For a superpower, being isolated is a critical vulnerability. So Beijing is working tirelessly to make sure the United States is the one left standing alone under the harsh glare of the diplomatic spotlight. Their method orchestrating a global chorus of disapproval in international bodies. We can already see China organizing its allies in blocs like BRICS, which includes major powers like Brazil, India, and South Africa, as well as within the United Nations itself. The narrative they are pushing is relentlessly consistent to depict the American intervention as a reckless unilateral move for dominance that shatters the bedrock principle of national sovereignty. This is no longer about getting enough votes to deploy soldiers, it's about controlling the story. Every single nation that adds its name to a statement condemning the US puts another point on the board for China. It masterfully casts the United States as the agent of chaos, while positioning China as the head of a more stable, rules-based system for the rest of the developing world. And this diplomatic full-court press has a very specific goal. It raises the political price for the US while assembling a bloc of nations that might be willing to help Beijing get around any future sanctions or financial blockades aimed at its Venezuelan holdings. Which of course brings us to the elephant in the room. If this asset is really that vital, why doesn't China just send its navy to the Caribbean to physically protect it? That would certainly generate some shocking headlines, but it would also be a colossal strategic blunder, and Beijing is well aware of it. Sending their fleet would mean playing the game on America's home turf where the United States military supremacy is absolute. Instead, China's strategy is to weaponize its own patience. By refusing to take the military bait, they pull off three critical objectives. First, they hold on to the moral high ground they've so carefully built by invoking international law framing the US as the lone warmonger. Second, they sidestep a direct shooting war that could easily escalate and jeopardize their truly essential interests like global trade lifelines or the delicate situation in Taiwan. And third, and this is the most crucial part, they get to shift the conflict to the arena where they hold the advantage economics and the long-term project of system building. You shouldn't see this as a sign of weakness, it's a deliberate calculation. They are choosing to exercise a slower, more methodical and potentially much more powerful form of influence. This is the kind of influence that isn't asserted in one dramatic clash, but over the course of the next decade in the world of global finance. This leads us to China's masterstroke, the long-game maneuver that is turning Venezuela into a global pivot point. For years, China has been systematically chipping away at the supremacy of the US dollar, the very foundation of American financial might. What for? Because the United States was only able to hit Venezuela with sanctions and throttle its oil exports by leveraging its control over the dollar-centric global financial system. The Venezuelan crisis serves as a live-action demonstration of why nations desperately need an alternative. China's campaign to provide one is now kicking into high gear, and their aim is perfectly clear: to make sure situations like this are impossible in the future. And how will they do it? By aggressively promoting the Chinese yuan for transactions in oil and other key commodities. By expanding their own international payment system, CIS, to be a direct competitor to the US-controlled SWIFT network. They're making an offer to other countries. Conduct your trade with us in yuan and your assets will be insulated from American political pressure. Every single barrel of Venezuelan oil that China can manage to keep moving outside the orbit of the dollar is a tactical victory. This is more than just payback for a lost asset. It's about leveraging this crisis to break the very financial instrument the US used to cause it. Across the globe, national leaders are taking notes. For a lot of nations, the American move feels like a page from a familiar playbook of heavy-handed intervention. This gives China's message of non-interference a lot more credibility. The real consequences will emerge in future agreements as countries begin to weigh the offers of loans that don't come with implied threats. This contest for trust is set to redraw the map of global alliances. So let's tie this all together. What is the ultimate lesson from the Venezuelan crisis? It is a stark real-time preview of what superpower competition looks like in the 21st century. The old Cold War was characterized by a nuclear deadlock and wars fought by proxy. The new rulebook is being drafted right now, and its chapters are titled Economic Leverage, Legal Warfare and Financial Sovereignty. Venezuela is proof that the most decisive battlegrounds are no longer physical territories, but the clauses in a contract and the architecture of a currency. Power is no longer just a matter of who possesses the most aircraft carriers, but who governs the payment network for the fuel that those carriers depend on. China's response, a combination of legal pressure, diplomatic alliances, and a strategic pivot away from the dollar, is not a one-time tactic. It is a prototype for what's to come. Future showdowns between major powers are going to resemble this, a struggle for control over the core infrastructure of global commerce and finance fought by lawyers, diplomats, music, and central bankers. The platform in Lake Maracaibo is far more than an oil rig. It is the first major pawn to be captured in this new, complicated and long-term game.